Ethan Anderson sat wide-eyed in the luxurious first-class cabin of Flight 2187 from Chicago to San Francisco, his heart full of wonder at every little detail around him. He was a bright, 10-year-old boy dressed smartly in a crisp blue button-down shirt with a playful bow tie printed with tiny airplanes and freshly pressed khaki pants. His mother, Dr. Shannice Anderson, a renowned pediatric surgeon known for her gentle touch and warm heart, had splurged on first-class tickets so they could travel in comfort to visit Ethan's grandmother, who had recently undergone hip replacement surgery. Even though this was only Ethan's third flight, the anticipation in his eyes was unmistakable as he clutched his favorite book about space exploration, ready to learn and imagine. As the cabin buzzed with the quiet hum of the airplane engines, passengers found their seats amid polite greetings and reassuring smiles from the flight attendants. "Mom, look at how big these seats are," Ethan exclaimed, running his small hand over the plush leather armrest of seat 2A by the window. His mother replied warmly, "Yes, honey, that's why I saved up for these tickets. I wanted our journey to be as special as our destination." After settling their carry-on bags in the overhead compartment, Dr. Anderson sat beside her son in seat 2B, ensuring that every detail was perfect for their trip. "Remember to keep your seatbelt fastened when the sign is on," she reminded him gently, a note of care in her voice. Outside the window, Ethan watched ground crew workers busily loading luggage onto the plane. The first-class cabin slowly filled with a mix of businessmen in expensive suits, a famous actress recognizable from a popular superhero movie, and several other distinguished travelers. Just as the boarding announcement signaled that the doors were closing, a visibly pregnant woman entered the cabin. Her forehead was glistening with perspiration, and she carried an air of urgency. Clad in a floral maternity dress that stretched over her pronounced baby bump, she appeared to be in her early 30s with blonde hair tied back in a messy bun. "Excuse me," she said breathlessly to a flight attendant. "I have a seat in coach, but I was hoping to get an upgrade. I'm 8 months pregnant, and my doctor recommended I get more legroom for this 5-hour flight." The flight attendant's face fell for a moment as she regretfully explained that first class was completely booked, adding that there had been one cancellation which, unfortunately, had already been filled. With a disappointed nod and a soft thank you, the pregnant woman began making her way back to the economy section. As soon as she passed by, Ethan couldn't help but notice the tenderness in the way she held her belly, as if guarding a precious secret. In a hushed voice, he tugged on his mother's sleeve and asked, "Mom, can I give my seat to that lady? She needs it more than me." His voice was small yet determined, and Dr. Anderson's eyes filled with both surprise and pride as she responded, "Are you sure, Ethan? You were so excited about sitting in first class." "I'm sure, Mom. My teacher, Ms. Robinson, always tells me to help people in need, and that lady has a baby. She should have a comfortable seat." Touched by her son's selflessness, Dr. Anderson agreed, and they quickly informed a kind flight attendant about Ethan's generous offer. The flight attendant was momentarily taken aback by the small boy's polite request, but her smile soon returned as she reassured him, "That's incredibly generous of you, young man. Let me see what we can do." In a matter of minutes, arrangements were made so that the pregnant woman, who introduced herself as Eliza Pearson, could move to a more comfortable seat in economy. Overwhelmed by Ethan's kind gesture, Eliza nearly burst into tears as she knelt to meet him at eye level. "You would really do that for me?" she asked softly. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan replied with the innocent certainty of youth. "My mom says it's important to help others, and I want you to be comfortable." Dr. Anderson couldn't help but smile proudly, even as her heart swelled with both joy and an inexplicable apprehension about the unfolding events. However, not everyone aboard the flight shared the same warm sentiment. In the midst of this touching exchange, a stern-looking gentleman in a tailored suit and polished shoes fixed his icy gaze on Ethan and his mother. Mr. Harold Jennings, a man known for his ruthless business acumen and a cold demeanor that often bordered on cruelty, frowned deeply at the display of selfless generosity. He whispered harshly to a nearby colleague, What kind of fool gives up his comfort for a stranger? This is not the way real strength is shown. Mr. Jennings, whose influence stretched into major corporate circles and who had little patience for sentimental acts, exuded an aura of disdain that seemed to darken the otherwise kind atmosphere of the cabin. As Ethan followed the flight attendant to the newly assigned seat in economy, Mr. Jennings made his way purposefully towards Dr. Anderson, his eyes glinting with barely concealed malice. "Dr. Anderson, I must say," he began in a tone that dripped with condescension, "it is quite disconcerting to see such unthinking sacrifice. A child giving up his seat might be noble in a fairy tale, but in reality, it shows a lack of self-respect and could lead to unforeseen consequences." Dr. Anderson, taken aback by his abrasive tone, tried to respond calmly. "Sir, Ethan's act of kindness is a lesson in compassion, something we could all stand to learn a bit more of in these troubled times." Mr. Jennings' expression darkened as he replied, "Compassion does not pay the bills, and it certainly does not justify letting the system be taken advantage of." His words carried a venomous undertone that sent a chill down the spines of those nearby, and even the kind flight attendant seemed to shrink slightly in his presence. Meanwhile, in economy, as Ethan settled into seat 32F, he tried to maintain his cheerful demeanor despite the cramped conditions. The young boy's enthusiasm remained undimmed, and he soon found himself engaged in conversation with Richard Blackwood, a middle-aged man seated next to him who had initially approached with a polite handshake. "Aren't you a little young to be traveling alone?" Richard had asked gently. "I'm 10, and my mom is in first class," Ethan had replied confidently, his voice filled with both pride and a quiet determination to stand by his decision. Richard, impressed by Ethan's straightforward honesty and natural charm, soon revealed that he was a philanthropist, involved in funding educational programs for underprivileged youth. Their conversation blossomed into one of mutual admiration until the growing tension caused by Mr. Jennings's earlier remarks began to echo in the back of Dr. Anderson's mind. Back in first class, as Dr. Anderson conversed with Eliza Pearson about the potential for sharing Ethan's story on a documentary series celebrating everyday heroes, the atmosphere was abruptly interrupted by the onset of turbulence. The seatbelt sign flickered on with a soft chime, and Dr. Anderson's heart pounded as she thought of Ethan's safety. In economy, Ethan was handling the bumps with the resilient spirit of youth, even as several passengers around him grew visibly anxious. Noticing a little girl across the aisle clinging to her mother in fear, Ethan leaned over and said in his reassuring tone, "It's just like when you hit a bump on the road in a car. Turbulence is nothing more than air moving around like waves in the ocean." Slowly, the frightened little girl's tears gave way to a timid smile, and her mother mouthed a grateful thank you across the aisle. Richard, who had been watching Ethan's comforting act with genuine admiration, nodded in approval and added, "You truly have a gift, young man." Even as the turbulence subsided, however, the memory of Mr. Jennings' cold words lingered in Dr. Anderson's mind. Later, when a flight attendant came to check on Ethan's well-being, she relayed a message from Dr. Anderson, saying she would come by once it was safe to do so. Ethan, with his usual sunny disposition, simply replied, "Please tell my mom not to worry." In that brief exchange, a sense of warmth and concern spread among the passengers, contrasting sharply with the underlying bitterness that Mr. Jennings had sown. Throughout the remainder of the flight, while Dr. Anderson and Eliza continued to discuss the merits of sharing Ethan's inspiring act with the world, Mr. Jennings' presence cast a long, foreboding shadow. His disapproving gaze and cutting remarks were a stark reminder that not every act of kindness is met with open hearts. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Dr. Anderson made her way down to economy to check on Ethan, who was now deeply engrossed in conversation with Richard about NASA's latest mission featured in his space book. "Hello, Dr. Anderson," Richard greeted as he noticed her approach. "I hope your son hasn't been troubled by the conversation we had earlier." Dr. Anderson managed a gentle smile, even as she recalled the bitter tone of Mr. Jennings's criticism. "He's been nothing short of remarkable, comforting others and spreading his light," she replied softly, her eyes betraying the quiet sorrow of a mother who knew that sometimes even the purest hearts can be wounded by the cruelty of those who misunderstand kindness. Even in that moment of togetherness, the harsh reality of the world lingered. Mr. Jennings' words had not only struck a nerve in Dr. Anderson, but had also left Ethan with an unspoken burden. The young boy, despite his innocence, now felt a pang of self-doubt, wondering if perhaps his generous act would someday be seen as a weakness, rather than the strength it truly was. And as the passengers disembarked, the lingering tension between the ideals of compassion and the cold cynicism of the world became a silent undercurrent, a reminder that every act of kindness, no matter how heartfelt, could sometimes invite unexpected cruelty. This journey, with its mix of gentle heroism and the stark intrusion of harsh reality, left an indelible mark on everyone aboard. For Ethan Anderson and his loving mother, the flight was not only a passage from one city to another, but a poignant lesson in the bittersweet nature of kindness. A lesson that would forever shape their lives and, perhaps, inspire others to choose compassion over indifference, even in the face of those who would cast a dark shadow on the light of generosity. Ethan Anderson's adventure continued the moment he and his mother, Dr. Shannice Anderson, stepped off the plane in San Francisco. As they navigated through the busy terminal, a tall gentleman in a crisp suit rose from his seat to greet Dr. Anderson with a firm handshake. "Dr. Anderson, it is an honor," he said warmly. "I am Richard Blackwood from Mercy Hospital's board. Your son has been delightful company. In fact, we were just talking about the possibility of him visiting one of our educational centers." Shanice's face lit up with recognition as she replied, "Mr. Blackwood, of course. Your work with underprivileged children is widely respected." In that moment, Shannice marveled at how Ethan's simple act of kindness on the airplane had already forged such meaningful connections. Before they could exchange more pleasantries, they met Eliza Pearson, who waited patiently at the gate with a gentle smile that belied a heart full of gratitude. "I wanted to thank you both again," she said, as she handed Dr. Anderson a sealed envelope. "This is a small token of my appreciation, and I hope you will consider my offer about the documentary." As they said their goodbyes and exchanged contact details with Richard, Ethan's eyes danced with excitement, even as he curiously asked, "Mom, what did that lady give you?" Dr. Anderson opened the envelope to reveal a gift certificate for a weekend stay at a luxury resort in Napa Valley, along with a handwritten note that expressed heartfelt thanks. "That was very generous of her," Shannice murmured, touched by the gesture. When Ethan inquired about the documentary, his mother explained that Eliza wanted to share the story of Ethan giving up his first-class seat so that it might inspire others to be kind. "Would I be on TV, like in a movie?" Ethan asked with wonder. "Maybe," Shannice replied softly, "but we don't have to decide right now." After a tender hug, Shannice suggested, "Let's focus on visiting Grandma first. She has been looking forward to seeing you." Unbeknownst to them, a pair of cold, calculating eyes watched from a distance. A woman with an icy expression and deliberate movements slowly pulled out her phone. In a quiet yet menacing tone, she said into the device, "I found them. The Anderson boy and his mother have just landed. We should move forward with the plan." Her words carried a sharpness that contrasted with the gentle goodwill that had filled the terminal just moments before. Her presence and sinister call hinted at a dark conspiracy lurking behind the scenes, and as Ethan and his mother walked away, she melted into the crowd like a shadow, determined to follow every step they took. Soon after, a taxi whisked them away from San Francisco International Airport to Grandma Josephine's home in the peaceful suburb of Millbury. The ride lasted just under 30 minutes as Ethan pressed his face against the window, wide-eyed at the sight of the Bay Area. "Mom, can we go see the Golden Gate Bridge while we are here?" he asked, his voice full of excitement and curiosity about all the new sights. Shannice smiled reassuringly and said, Of course, honey. We will have plenty of time for sightseeing after Grandma feels a bit stronger. As the taxi pulled up to a modest single-story house with a beautifully maintained garden, colorful flowers lined the walkway, and a new wheelchair ramp at the entrance spoke of recent care and attention to detail. At the door, Grandma Josephine waited with her walker, her eyes sparkling with joy. "There are my favorite people in the whole wide world," she called out in a warm, familiar tone. Ethan raced up the walkway, careful to hold back his usual exuberance because his mother had reminded him to be gentle, given Grandma's fragile hip. "Mom said I have to be careful with you," Ethan explained, and Grandma Josephine laughed heartily. "Your mother worries too much. Come here and give your grandma a proper hug." As Ethan embraced her, Shannice paid the taxi driver and collected their luggage. Inside, the house was filled with the delicious aroma of freshly baked peach cobbler, a recipe passed down through generations. A kind, middle-aged woman in scrubs named Darlene appeared from the kitchen, gently chiding. "Mrs. Anderson, you really shouldn't be on your feet so much," before stepping aside to let Shannice and Ethan settle in. Once they were comfortably gathered in the cozy living room, Ethan eagerly launched into recounting his airplane adventure. "And then I gave up my seat to a pregnant lady, and guess what? She makes TV shows, Grandma. She wants to put me on a show about being kind to people." Grandma Josephine's eyes widened in surprise as she listened intently, and she looked over at Shannice for confirmation. Shannice nodded slowly while retrieving Eliza's business card from her purse. "This is Eliza Pearson from Pearson Media Group. She is working on a documentary series about everyday heroes and thinks Ethan would be perfect for the first episode." Grandma Josephine held the card gently, examining it as if it were something precious. "And what do you think about this, Shannice? You have always been so protective of Ethan's privacy," she asked softly. Shannice sighed, running a hand through her hair as she admitted, "I am conflicted. I worry about him being in the spotlight, yet it is a positive message, and Ethan seems excited about the idea." After a while, they agreed to think about it later, focusing instead on the joyous reunion with Grandma. Later that evening, after a hearty dinner and enjoying 2 slices of warm peach cobbler, Ethan sat on the porch swing with Grandma Josephine while his mother took a few work calls inside. "Grandma, do you think I should be on that lady's TV show?" Ethan asked, his legs swaying softly on the swing. Grandma Josephine considered his question carefully before replying, "What do you think, Ethan? Why would you want to do it?" With a serious look, Ethan explained, "At school, there's a boy named Tyler who gets bullied because he has 2 dads and the other kids say mean things. I always stand up for him. I think if more kids saw that being kind is cool, maybe they would stop being mean." Grandma Josephine's heart swelled with pride and a touch of sorrow as she recalled the harshness of the world. "That is a very thoughtful reason, Ethan. Your grandfather always used to say that a single candle can light 1,000 others without diminishing its own flame. It means that when you share your light, you make the world a bit brighter." Ethan nodded solemnly and said, "I think I want to do the show then, to light candles." With a tender hug, Grandma Josephine whispered, "Your grandpa would be so proud of the young man you are becoming." Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the house, Dr. Anderson's phone buzzed persistently. Unbeknownst to her, an urgent email from Eliza Pearson had arrived with the subject line, "Urgent, please read, security concern regarding Ethan." Still half asleep from the long journey, Shannice blinked away sleep and opened the email. Her eyes widened as she read the alarming message. "Dear Dr. Anderson, I hope this message finds you and Ethan well after your flight. I must apologize for the urgency and alarming nature of this communication, but during our standard background research for the documentary, my team uncovered some troubling information. It appears that someone has been monitoring your professional activities for some time, especially regarding a specific surgery you performed last year on a child named Aaliyah Williams. I have learned that the individual involved may have been on our flight today and may have overheard our conversation. I have taken precautions by hiring private security for my family, and I strongly recommend that you consider doing the same. Please call me at your earliest convenience at the private number below. Do not respond to this email as I cannot guarantee its security. With concern, Eliza Pearson. At the mention of Aaliyah Williams, Shannice felt a chill run down her spine. Aaliyah had been a 7-year-old patient with a rare heart condition whose surgery had been high risk but ultimately successful. However, complications during recovery had led to severe setbacks that haunted Shannice to this day. The email's dire warning made her heart pound with fear and uncertainty. Here was a threat that not only endangered her professional reputation, but now also placed Ethan in harm's way, simply because of a kind deed that had sparked a chain reaction of unforeseen consequences. This message from Eliza introduced a new and dangerous twist to their lives. The gentle journey that had begun with small acts of kindness was now being marred by a dark and ominous plan orchestrated by a merciless figure. That mysterious woman with the cold, calculating gaze, who had earlier declared we should move forward with the plan, suddenly loomed larger in Shannice's mind. Her words echoed as a reminder that cruelty and malice were never far behind even the purest acts of generosity. Shannice now understood that the forces aligned against them were not merely critics of kindness, but determined adversaries willing to invade their privacy and safety for reasons that remained hidden behind layers of deceit and greed. As the fog over San Francisco lifted by midday, Shannice sat in Grandma Josephine's guest bedroom, wrestling with the weight of the email and the growing dread that came with it. Her thoughts were a mixture of maternal protectiveness and professional vulnerability. How could a moment of pure-hearted generosity invite such danger, and who was behind this ominous surveillance that targeted her and her beloved son? The questions swirled in her mind as she prepared herself for the challenging days ahead. In that quiet moment, as soft morning light filtered through the window, Dr. Shannice Anderson resolved to safeguard Ethan at all costs. Even as the promise of a television appearance and the accolades from kind strangers filled their hearts with hope, the dark undercurrent of greed and malice threatened to shatter their peaceful world. This tangled web of kindness, ambition, and sinister plots left Ethan and his mother in a precarious position. Their journey, which had started with a simple, heartfelt act on an airplane, had now evolved into a battleground where the forces of compassion clashed with the cruelty of those who sought to exploit it. And so, with heavy hearts and unwavering determination, they braced themselves for the unknown challenges ahead, hoping that the light of kindness would ultimately prevail over the shadows of malevolence. Ethan Anderson's life had taken a dramatic turn ever since his selfless act on that flight. Now, as the day began in earnest at Grandma Josephine's home in Millbury, the shadows of the past and threats from powerful enemies were creeping in with alarming suddenness. It all started with the bitter memories of a contentious legal battle when the Williams family had accused Dr. Shannice Anderson, Ethan's devoted mother, of negligence following a high-risk surgery performed on a young patient named Aaliyah Williams. Although the case was settled out of court 6 months ago and her name had been cleared, the fallout still lingered in the form of thinly veiled threats from Victor Williams, a wealthy and influential real estate magnate whose anger had never truly subsided. His public dissatisfaction at the hearing was dismissed by Shannice as the anguished outburst of a distraught father. Yet those words now resonated with a menacing tone as new evidence emerged. As Shannice was about to return a series of frantic phone calls and text messages from Eliza Pearson, her trusted documentary producer, Ethan bounded into the doorway. Dressed neatly and eager for the day ahead, he announced, "Mom, Grandma says she's making blueberry pancakes, and can we go to the Science Museum after breakfast, please?" Shannice forced a gentle smile, hiding the storm that was brewing inside her. "Sure, sweetie, that sounds fun. Why don't you help Grandma while I get dressed?" she replied, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. Once Ethan scampered off to lend a hand in the cheerful kitchen, Shannice dialed Eliza's number with trembling fingers and a racing heart. "Dr. Anderson, thank goodness." Eliza's voice rang out immediately on the secure line. "Did you get my email?" Shannice replied, her voice hushed with concern. As she admitted she had just read its urgent contents, Eliza's tone grew tense as she explained, "I have enough certainty now to hire armed guards for my own family. My husband's brother, who works in corporate security, ran a standard background check on the Williams family after I mentioned your name. They found something alarming. Victor Williams has now hired a private investigator to track your every move." Shannice's stomach churned as she struggled to comprehend the gravity of the situation. "And you think someone from our flight is involved?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Eliza confirmed, "Yes. The woman in seat 3C, directly behind where I was sitting after Ethan gave up his seat. She took an unusual interest in our conversation. Our security team has identified her as Carmen Vasquez, a former intelligence operative now working in the private sector, and she is on Williams' payroll." The implications were staggering. Ethan's innocent act of kindness had inadvertently thrust them into a dangerous web of surveillance and malice. "What should I do? We are staying at my mother's house, and I can't risk putting her in harm's way too," Shannice said, her voice laced with both determination and vulnerability. "My team is already en route to you," Eliza reassured firmly. "They will set up a security perimeter and brief you on the next steps. In the meantime, act normally. Do not alarm Ethan or your mother yet." Hanging up, Shannice dressed quickly, her mind swirling with worry and doubt. Was all of this truly happening? Was it just the paranoia of a father seeking to control the narrative around his daughter's medical ordeal? Or was there a very real threat looming over them? Deep down, she trusted Eliza's instincts and thorough investigative work, for Eliza was known for her unwavering integrity and meticulous attention to detail. Downstairs, the morning scene appeared as peaceful as ever. Ethan was setting the table with childlike enthusiasm, while Grandma Josephine flipped blueberry pancakes with the expertise honed over decades. Darlene, the kind nurse who had been taking care of Josephine, busily organized the medications on the kitchen counter. "There she is," Grandma Josephine cheerfully called. "I was beginning to think you were going to sleep in until noon," Shannice replied lightly. "Sorry, Mom, I was just catching up on some work emails," even as her heart pounded with dread. Ethan's bright eyes caught her tone for a moment, and he asked again, "Mom, can we still go to the museum after breakfast? Grandma says there's a new space exhibit." Shannice hesitated, not wanting to commit to any public outing until she could get word from her security team. Just then, the doorbell rang unexpectedly, an occurrence that sent a jolt of alarm through her. "That's strange," Grandma Josephine remarked, her voice tinged with confusion. "I'm not expecting anyone this early." Darlene moved toward the door as Shannice's protective instincts kicked in. "I'll get it," Shannice said sharply, quickly modulating her tone when she noticed the startled expressions on everyone's faces. "I mean I'll get it," she corrected, her heart hammering as she approached the front door and peered through the peephole. Standing there were two professional-looking individuals, a man and a woman, dressed in business casual attire that hinted at their athletic builds. The woman spoke into the door. "Dr. Anderson, I'm Diana Reeves with Sentinel Security Services. Eliza Pearson sent us. May we speak with you?" Shannice opened the door with caution, her eyes narrowing as she studied their identification badges and business cards. "We should speak privately," Diana suggested with an unsettling calm as she glanced over her shoulder. "Of course, please come in," Shannice replied, her voice steady despite the undercurrent of fear. As the duo entered, Ethan looked up from the dining table with innocent curiosity. "Mom, who are these people?" he asked. Quick to ease the tension, Diana interjected smoothly. "Hi there. I'm Diana, a friend of Ms. Pearson. She told me all about how you gave up your seat on the airplane. That was a very brave and kind thing to do." Ethan beamed at the praise, his excitement momentarily restored. "Are you going to be in the TV show too?" he asked, his youthful wonder shining through. Diana smiled warmly and said, "Not in front of the camera, but I do help Miss Pearson with her work." She then engaged Grandma Josephine with friendly conversation about the delicious pancakes, while her colleague Jackson pulled Shannice aside for a more serious conversation. In a quiet corner of Josephine's modest home office, Jackson laid out the situation with the precision of someone used to handling crises. "Dr. Anderson, we have reason to believe that you and Ethan are under surveillance," he said gravely. "Our intelligence shows that Victor Williams has been tracking your activities ever since the lawsuit ended. Initially, the monitoring was passive, merely noting your professional engagements, social media posts, and public appearances. But ever since your connection with Eliza Pearson became known to them, there has been a marked escalation in their efforts." Shannice, bewildered, asked, "But the case is settled." "His daughter is doing well. What does he want from me?" Jackson's expression was grim as he explained, "Revenge, quite possibly. Our sources indicate that Williams believes your testimony during the legal proceedings damaged his reputation among Chicago's elite. He is a man accustomed to power and control. Being publicly contradicted by a doctor of your stature and as a woman of color struck a blow to his ego that he refuses to forgive." The mention of racial undertones made Shannice's heart ache even more. She had endured subtle and sometimes overt disrespect during the proceedings, and now that cruelty was being channeled into something far more dangerous. "Do we need to leave San Francisco?" Shannice asked, anxiety creeping into her tone. Jackson replied, "Not necessarily. Our team will maintain round-the-clock surveillance of your property and implement strict security protocols for any public outings. Ms. Pearson has arranged for all expenses to be covered." Shannice's voice trembled with indignation. "I can't accept that. This isn't her responsibility," she protested. Jackson hesitated before adding, "Ms. Pearson feels partially responsible for bringing this situation to light and wants to ensure your family's safety. There is one more matter. Williams has connections to local media, and if he chooses to, he could turn this into a public spectacle, portraying himself as a grieving father seeking justice against a negligent doctor. But, as you know, the complications with Elia were a known risk of the procedure. The hospital's investigation completely cleared you. Still, facts are often ignored in the court of public opinion, especially when someone with Williams' resources is controlling the narrative." Before Shannice could absorb this sobering reality, Diana appeared at the study door with a concerned look. "Dr. Anderson, your mother is asking for you. I think she suspects something is wrong." Shannice sighed, realizing that her mother's keen intuition had always been her guiding light. "I need to tell her what's going on," she admitted softly. Jackson nodded and said, "We will be discreet around Ethan, but your mother must be fully informed." Later in the kitchen, as Ethan happily devoured his blueberry pancakes and regaled Diana with stories about his science fair project on renewable energy, Shannice sat beside Grandma Josephine. In a low, urgent tone, she explained the situation in full detail, while Jackson filled in the necessary gaps. Grandma Josephine listened without interruption, her expression hardening with a fierce determination that Shannice had seen countless times in her own mother. "Victor Williams thinks he can intimidate my family," Josephine declared, her voice steady and resolute. "In my day, we stood up to men like him. We never backed down, and we certainly won't start now." She turned to Jackson and said, "Tell Ms. Pearson we appreciate her help, but this is now a family matter. My late husband marched for justice and equality, and he would never have wanted his daughter and grandson to live in fear." Drawing strength from her mother's unwavering resolve, Shannice squeezed Grandma Josephine's hand. "Mom, you're right. We won't hide, but we will be smart about this. What do you recommend?" Over the next hour, they formulated a careful plan. Security would be present yet unobtrusive, and the planned trip to the Science Museum would proceed with additional precautions. They agreed that before any media could twist the story, Shannice's attorney would be contacted to prepare for potential defamatory allegations from Victor Williams, whose anger now seemed poised to erupt into something far more dangerous. As they finalized these arrangements, Ethan returned to the kitchen, with Diana following close behind. "Your son is extraordinarily knowledgeable about space exploration, Dr. Anderson," Diana remarked warmly as she listened to Ethan explain the intricacies of the Perseverance rover's sample collection system. Ethan's eyes shone with pride as he asked, "Mom, can Diana come to the museum with us? She's never seen the Mars exhibit." After a brief exchange of glances among the adults, and with Diana giving a subtle nod of confirmation, Shannice agreed. "That sounds wonderful, Ethan," she said, marveling at his ability to bond so naturally with someone who had entered their lives under such stressful circumstances. Just then, Shannice's phone buzzed with a new text from Eliza. "Be careful, Williams just flew into SFO this morning." The abstract threat now became frighteningly tangible and alarmingly close. Shannice glanced at Ethan, who remained blissfully unaware and excited about their upcoming museum adventure, and felt a fierce surge of protective love. She would not allow Victor Williams to tarnish her son's joy or endanger his safety. With renewed determination, she texted back a terse message. "We're ready for him." And even as she prepared for what lay ahead, a hint of an unrelated note flickered on her social media feed. A friendly reminder to subscribe to the channel that had brought this unfolding drama to light. The juxtaposition of such mundane distractions with the gravity of their situation underscored the surreal nature of their lives now. In that moment, as the early morning light filtered softly through the windows and the comforting scent of blueberry pancakes filled the air, Shannice Anderson steeled herself for the battles to come. The kindness that had once defined her and Ethan was now shadowed by the bitter machinations of a powerful enemy, and though the road ahead was fraught with danger and heartache, she vowed to protect her family at all costs. At the California Academy of Sciences, the day had begun with a bustle of families and curious visitors, yet beneath the excitement lay a tension that only Shannice Anderson could sense. Accompanied by her bright-eyed son Ethan and a small, discreet security team, she tried her best to appear relaxed while every instinct told her to be on high alert. Diana Reeves, who had changed into casual clothing so she could blend in as a friendly family acquaintance, walked alongside Shannice and Ethan. Meanwhile, Jackson and two other team members strategically took up positions throughout the museum, their eyes scanning every corner for any sign of trouble. Ethan was in his element as he dashed from one exhibit to the next, his voice echoing with delight whenever he learned something new about the cosmos. At the planetarium show on Mars exploration, he practically bounced in his seat, and even the docent at the space exhibit couldn't help but praise him. "Your son has a bright future in astronomy," the docent said to Shannice, as Ethan eagerly examined a scaled model of our solar system. Shannice beamed with pride and replied, "Thank you. He's always been fascinated by space." Even as she spoke those words, she maintained a vigilant awareness of their surroundings, every so often glancing around with worry hidden behind her warm smile. Diana stayed close by, her friendly demeanor a well-practiced mask over constant scanning of the crowd. During a moment when Ethan was completely absorbed in an interactive display about gravitational fields, Diana leaned in quietly and murmured to Shannice, "We have identified two individuals who appear to be monitoring you. There is a man near the aquarium entrance and a woman by the gift shop. They are keeping their distance, but they are definitely tracking your movements." Shannice's heart pounded, yet she forced herself to remain calm. "What do we do?" she whispered, and Diana reassured her. "Exactly what we are doing now. Enjoy the museum. We have them under observation, and Jackson has engaged additional support. We will modify our exit strategy if needed, but for now, let Ethan have his fun." Every fiber of Shannice's being was devoted to protecting Ethan. This was not only about keeping him physically safe, it was about preserving the innocence of his childhood. A childhood that should be filled with wonder and learning, not the dark weight of adult worries and danger. "Mom, look!" Ethan called excitedly as he waved her over to a virtual reality station where visitors could experience a simulated spacewalk. "Can I try it, please?" he pleaded with sparkling eyes. "Of course, honey," she answered, though her voice trembled ever so slightly with anxiety. As Ethan donned the VR headset, a sudden chill raced through Shannice's veins when she caught sight of a familiar yet utterly unwelcome figure in her peripheral vision. Standing about 50 feet away, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that did nothing to disguise his predatory intent, was Victor Williams. His eyes were fixed on her and Ethan with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Beside him stood a slim, sharp-featured woman whom Shannice recognized immediately as Carmen Vasquez, the very same woman Eliza had described from the flight, now unmistakably on Williams' payroll. Diana had already noted their presence, and her posture shifted imperceptibly as she adjusted a concealed earpiece. "Subjects identified at 2 o'clock remain in position," Diana whispered, her tone low and determined. Victor's unwavering stare was like a silent declaration. "I found you." Quickly, Shannice moved closer to Ethan, positioning herself between him and the menacing gaze of Victor Williams. Diana stepped forward naturally, casually, pretending to take photos of the exhibit to block the view further. "How long is the VR experience?" Diana asked an attendant in a light tone that belied the urgency of the situation. "About 5 minutes," the attendant replied, and though it was only a short period, those minutes stretched interminably for Shannice as she guarded her son's safety with every fiber of her being. When Ethan finally removed the headset, his face glowing with the thrill of his simulated spacewalk, Diana gently guided them toward the rainforest dome, deliberately steering them away from the direction where Victor had been standing. "That was awesome!" Ethan exclaimed with a mixture of wonder and excitement. "It felt like I was really floating in space." Shannice mustered a smile and replied, "I'm glad you enjoyed it, sweetie. The rainforest exhibit is supposed to be amazing too." Inside the dome, the humid air and dense vegetation offered a natural camouflage, a welcome cover for their hasty retreat. At a quieter observation area near the exhibit, Jackson met them with an expression that made Shannice's stomach sink further. "We need to leave now," he said in a low, urgent tone. "There are more of Williams' people here than we anticipated. We have arranged transportation from the service entrance." Before Shannice could protest, Ethan piped up. "But we haven't seen the penguin feeding yet, Mom. You promised." His voice was tinged with disappointment that broke her heart. Diana knelt beside Ethan, her expression both gentle and serious as she explained, "Marcus, remember how in space missions sometimes astronauts have to change their plans because of unexpected conditions? Well, right now we need to adjust our mission parameters. But I promise we will arrange a private tour of the penguin habitat another day, behind the scenes, where regular visitors don't get to go." Ethan's eyes widened with a mix of wonder and relief. "Really? We could do that?" he asked eagerly, and Diana confirmed with a warm smile. "Absolutely. Miss Pearson has connections everywhere, including this museum." Diana then continued to frame the situation in terms that even a 10-year-old could understand. "What is our extraction route, Commander Diana?" Ethan asked in a playful tone, and she chuckled softly. "Through the tropical plants, past the butterfly chamber and down the staff corridor. We will rendezvous with our transport at Point Echo. Copy that?" Ethan nodded seriously, completely absorbed in the adventure rather than the looming danger. As they made their way through the dense foliage of the rainforest exhibit, Shannice marveled at Diana's ability to turn a potentially terrifying situation into a kind of covert mission that felt almost like a game. By doing so, Diana not only secured Ethan's cooperation but also shielded him from the fear that lurked just beneath the surface. They eventually exited through a service door marked "Staff Only," where a museum security guard was waiting to escort them down a back hallway. Outside, a nondescript van with tinted windows idled patiently. "That's our ride," Jackson confirmed as he opened the side door and ushered them in. Only then did Shannice allow herself to exhale, though her mind remained troubled by the day's events. Inside the van, as the driver smoothly pulled away from the curb, Ethan looked back with a curious tone. "Did we just run away from the bad guys, Mom?" he asked, his young mind trying to comprehend the sudden change in their outing. Shannice hesitated, struggling with how much to reveal without frightening him. Before she could answer, Diana intervened with a calm explanation. "We executed a tactical retreat, which is different from running away. Just like in space missions or security operations, sometimes the smart move is to regroup and assess the situation." Ethan nodded slowly as he remembered the story of the Apollo 13 mission, where plans had to change for the crew to return safely. "Exactly like that," Diana affirmed, and Ethan's concern visibly eased as he began to see himself as a little hero on a secret mission. The van took a series of indirect routes, making several turns and detours to ensure they weren't followed. When they finally arrived back at Grandma Josephine's house, the relief on Shannice's face was palpable. Grandma Josephine stood anxiously at the door, with Darlene hovering protectively at her side. "Thank goodness you're safe," Josephine exclaimed as they entered. Almost immediately, Ethan launched into an enthusiastic account of their mission at the museum, detailing every twist and turn, even promising a private tour of the penguin habitat in the future. While Ethan's animated storytelling filled the room with a spark of joy, Shannice pulled Jackson aside in a hushed conversation. He spoke with a tone that brooked no nonsense. "Dr. Anderson, I have to be direct. We have identified at least 4 operatives working for Victor Williams at the museum, and possibly more. They are professional and well-funded. Williams is escalating his efforts faster than we anticipated. This isn't just passive surveillance anymore. He seems to be making a point by getting close to you and Ethan today, as if to send a clear, menacing message." The gravity of his words sent ice through Shannice's veins. She wondered how one act of kindness, Ethan's simple gesture on that flight, had spiraled into such a dangerous predicament. "What is our next move?" Shannice asked in a shaky voice, fully aware that the time for waiting was over. Jackson explained, "We are securing the perimeter here, but your current location is now compromised. Miss Pearson has arranged for her family's vacation property in Napa, a remote and gated estate equipped with top-notch security systems, as a safer alternative." Janice's heart sank at the thought of uprooting her mother during her recovery, but before she could protest further, Grandma Josephine interjected firmly, "A wine country vacation sounds lovely. I want to be clear though, we are not running away. We are strategically repositioning while we prepare to fight back. I will not allow some entitled businessman to terrorize my family simply because his ego was bruised." Her voice, strong and unwavering despite her age and physical frailty, brought a fresh surge of determination to Shannice. "Mom's right," she agreed softly, drawing strength from her mother's decades of resilience. "If Williams wants to make this public spectacle, then perhaps we should take control of the narrative. Eliza's documentary offer might be our opportunity to tell our side of the story." Before they could finalize their plans, Shannice's phone rang with an urgent call from Eliza Pearson. With a deep breath, Shannice answered. Eliza's voice was strained and anxious. "I just received a call from a Chicago Tribune reporter asking for comment on a story about you. They are running a piece tomorrow alleging inappropriate care in the Williams case, claiming to have new evidence." Shannice's voice turned firm as she responded, "There isn't any new evidence. The facts speak for themselves. I have been cleared." Eliza's tone darkened as she explained, "Truth is rarely a safeguard in the court of public opinion, especially when someone like Williams with his vast resources controls the narrative. My offer for the Napa property still stands. My security team believes your current location is too exposed." After a brief pause, Shannice said, "We'll take you up on it. And Eliza, I've been thinking about your documentary offer. If Williams is going to try to smear us, then we should present our own story. Ethan's act of kindness deserves to be shared, and it deserves to be celebrated for the way it has already touched so many lives." There was a moment of quiet on the line before Eliza replied with solemn determination, "Are you sure? Once we go public, there is no turning back." Shannice's answer was steady and resolute. "I am sure," she confirmed, her voice echoing the quiet strength of a mother determined to protect her family and honor her son's pure heart. In that moment, as Shannice listened to her mother's supportive words and saw Ethan's innocent excitement still shining in his eyes, she vowed to fight back against the cruelty of Victor Williams. Even if the road ahead was fraught with danger and heartache, she would do everything in her power to ensure that the kindness within her family would shine brighter than the malice that sought to destroy it. Now more than ever, we need stories like his. Eliza Pearson's warm yet determined voice echoed over the phone as she told Dr. Shannice Anderson, "I couldn't agree more. All right then, let's get you to Napa safely first, and then we will start filming." Shannice listened intently as Eliza explained that she would send over the preliminary contracts for review. After ending the call, Shannice gathered her resolve and quickly filled her mother and Jackson in on the conversation. With a steely tone, her mother, Josephine, declared, "It's settled then. We leave for Napa and we tell our story our way." Immediately, Jackson began coordinating with his team for the relocation, while Shannice went in search of her son, Ethan, who was in the kitchen helping Darlene prepare sandwiches for lunch. Ethan proudly announced, "Hey Mom, I'm making your favorite turkey with avocado," and Shannice could not help but smile as her heart swelled with love for this extraordinary child who had shown kindness on that fateful flight. As she approached him, she gently broached the subject. "Listen, how would you feel about a change of plans? Instead of staying at Grandma's house, we might go stay at a big house in Napa Valley for a while. There will be a swimming pool and lots of space to explore." At the mention of a new adventure, Ethan's eyes lit up. "Cool. Can Commander Diana and her team come too? They are awesome," he asked excitedly. Shannice laughed softly, relieved at his enthusiasm, and replied, "Yes, they will be coming with us, and guess what? Ms. Pearson, the TV producer from the plane, might visit us there to talk more about that documentary." Ethan's interest only grew when she mentioned the documentary. "The one about being kind to people? About giving up my seat?" he said with a mixture of pride and wonder. Shannice encouraged him, asking, "How would you feel about telling that story on camera, about why you decided to help Ms. Pearson on the plane?" Ethan considered this seriously, his young mind already filled with visions of changing the world. "I think it's a good idea. Maybe if kids see it, they will be nicer to each other at school, like Tyler with his two dads. Maybe the mean kids will stop being mean if they see our show," he explained, with surprising clarity and empathy. Shannice was struck once again by her son's natural kindness and wisdom that ran deeper than his years. As they sat down to lunch, the room was filled with a unique blend of determination and love. Around the table gathered her strong-willed mother, her compassionate son, the dedicated nurse Darlene, and the security professionals who had quickly become indispensable to their safety. Despite the stress and uncertainty that had shadowed their days, there was an unmistakable warmth at this table, a warmth that no amount of money or power could ever replace. Victor Williams might have his vast resources and influence, but the Anderson family had something far more valuable: truth, integrity, and the unbreakable bond of family. With Eliza Pearson's support, they planned to share Ethan's simple act of kindness with the world. Their story was proof that even the smallest gesture of compassion could create ripples of change. What Victor Williams did not realize was that by targeting Shannice and Ethan, he had unwittingly set in motion events that would not only clear Shannice's name once and for all, but also inspire countless others. The narrative of a 10-year-old boy who gave up his first-class seat to help a pregnant woman was now intertwined with a fight for justice. A fight that would expose the cruelty of a man driven by wounded pride and bitterness. The journey to Eliza Pearson's Napa Valley estate felt like entering another world. After winding along miles of vineyard-lined roads, their small convoy of vehicles passed through an imposing security gate and up a long driveway flanked by towering cypress trees. Ethan pressed his face eagerly against the window, marveling, "Whoa, it looks like a castle." The Mediterranean-style villa was indeed impressive, with a terracotta roof, sturdy stone walls, and sweeping views of the surrounding vineyards. On the front steps, Eliza herself stood waiting with her husband, Matthew by her side. "Welcome, everyone," she called warmly as the vehicles pulled up, her smile genuine and reassuring. Introductions were made quickly as luggage was unloaded and carried inside. Josephine was particularly impressed with the property's thoughtful accessibility features: wide doorways, an elevator between floors, and zero-threshold entries. Matthew explained while showing Josephine to her ground-floor suite. "We wanted her to maintain her independence as much as possible." Josephine approved with a kind nod, saying, "Very thoughtful. Most people don't consider these things until they need them." Meanwhile, Ethan was off exploring the backyard with its sparkling infinity pool that overlooked the lush vineyards. Diana, still fulfilling her security role while blending in as a family friend, accompanied him and entertained his endless questions about the property. In the villa's study, Shannice, Eliza, and Jackson gathered to discuss their next steps. Eliza laid out printouts of the Chicago Tribune article set to run the following morning. "My contact at the paper shared this with me," she explained as she spread the pages on the desk. "They claim to be presenting both sides, but the allegations are deeply concerning." Shannice scanned the article, her face darkening with each word. The piece cited an anonymous hospital source, claiming that Shannice had made a critical error during Aaliyah Williams' surgery, an error that was not documented in any official records. It further alleged that the hospital had covered up the mistake to protect her rising career and reputation. Shannice's voice trembled with righteous indignation as she said firmly, "This is blatantly false." Jackson added cautiously, "Every aspect of that surgery was documented by multiple team members and monitored by the chief of pediatric cardiology. These allegations, while false, are crafted to plant seeds of doubt about your professional competence. It is clearly Williams' strategy." Eliza nodded grimly, "And there are racial undertones woven throughout the article. Notice how the anonymous source implies that you received preferential treatment because of diversity initiatives at the hospital." The weight of these words fell heavily on Shannice. Despite graduating top of her class at Johns Hopkins and publishing groundbreaking research in pediatric surgery, she had long battled the injustice of having her achievements attributed to anything but her own hard work and merit. "We need to respond immediately and forcefully," Eliza continued. "I have prepared a statement condemning these false allegations and announcing our documentary project. We will highlight Ethan's act of kindness as emblematic of your family's character, directly contradicting Williams' narrative." Shannice's maternal instincts flared as she questioned, "Is it fair to put Ethan in the spotlight like this?" Her voice was tender with concern. Eliza reassured her, "We will be extremely careful about his involvement. The documentary will focus on the positive impact of his actions, not on the controversy with Williams. The timing of the announcement serves a strategic purpose by establishing our narrative before his allegations gain traction." After further discussion, Shannice agreed to the approach. Together, they drafted a joint statement from Shannice and Pearson Media Group, announcing a documentary series on everyday heroes, with Ethan's airplane gesture as the inaugural story. During their work, Matthew appeared at the study door with a cheerful announcement. "Dinner will be ready soon. Also, I thought you might like to see this. Ethan and Diana have made quite the impression on our staff." He held up his phone and showed a video of Ethan in the kitchen, earnestly teaching Diana and the villa's chef how to make his famous chocolate chip pancakes. A treasured family recipe, passed down from Josephine. "In the video," Ethan explained, "I used to make these with my grandpa before he went to heaven. The secret is to add a little bit of cinnamon to the batter. It makes the chocolate taste more chocolatey." Shannice felt tears well up as the tender memory of her late father mingled with the pride she felt for her son, whose innocence and generosity shone brightly amid the dark clouds of their current challenges. Eliza's soft voice broke the silence as she said, "Your son is extraordinary. The world needs more Ethans." Shannice wiped away a tear and agreed, "Indeed it does. Let's make sure we protect him while sharing his story." Later that evening, as the family gathered for dinner on the villa's terrace, the sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks over the vineyards. The atmosphere was almost normal, a brief reprieve from the turmoil. Ethan excitedly regaled everyone with fascinating facts about Mars, while Josephine shared heartwarming stories from her years as a school principal. Meanwhile, Matthew, a former documentary filmmaker turned vineyard manager, engaged Ethan in a discussion about space photography. "Have you ever thought about becoming an astrophotographer, Ethan? Capturing images of stars and planets is a real job," he said, his tone both encouraging and gentle. Ethan's eyes widened with wonder as he asked, "Mom, can we get a telescope?" Shannice laughed warmly and replied, "We'll see, honey," grateful for this moment of normalcy amid the extraordinary circumstances they faced. After dinner, as Ethan and Josephine played a board game in the living room under Diana's watchful yet friendly eye, Eliza pulled Shannice aside. In a quiet tone, she confessed, "There is something I haven't told you, something I discovered during our background research that might explain William's vendetta against you." Once they were alone in the study, Eliza continued, "Victor Williams' first wife, Amara, was Nigerian. They divorced when Aaliyah was just 2 years old. The custody battle was brutal, and Williams used his wealth and connections to essentially erase Amara from our daughter's life." Shannice frowned deeply and asked, "What does this have to do with me?" Eliza explained. "Amara was a doctor, a cardiologist like yourself, and Williams systematically destroyed her career with tactics similar to what he is now attempting with you. False allegations, media smears, and professional isolation." She paused before adding, "Based on our sources, when Williams saw you, a successful black female doctor caring for his daughter, it triggered something in him. Perhaps guilt, perhaps anger that Amara's replacement in Aaliyah's life resembled her own mother." The revelation landed like a heavy blow. "So this isn't really about the surgery at all," Shannice murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "No," Eliza replied. "The complications from the surgery were merely a convenient excuse. Our team believes this is deeply personal for Williams." Shannice sank into a chair as she processed the information, her heart aching with the knowledge that her success and compassion were now being targeted by a man determined to erase a part of his past. "Does Aaliyah know about her birth mother?" Shannice asked softly. "According to our sources, no. Cynthia Williams, his second wife, adopted Aaliyah when she was 4, and all mentions of Amara have been systematically removed from their lives," Eliza said. "That is heartbreaking," Shannice murmured. "What happened to Amara?" Eliza continued. "She returned to Nigeria after losing custody and tragically died in a car accident 3 years ago." Shannice sat heavily, the weight of the past and the cruelty of the present intermingling in her heart. In that moment, the resolve in her eyes grew stronger. Despite the merciless attacks launched by Victor Williams and the pain of having her integrity questioned, she vowed to fight back with every ounce of strength she possessed. Eliza's face was somber as she explained that Williams did not even allow Aaliyah to attend her own funeral, and now all the pieces were falling into place. Throughout Aaliyah's treatment, Williams had been hostile, demanding second opinions only from white male doctors. At the time, I thought it was just the stress of having a critically ill child, but now a disturbing pattern emerged. I whispered, "This changes things," realizing that going public with this painful connection might expose a vulnerable child to even more heartache. Eliza agreed, saying she was hesitant to use that information to defend me. We rejoined the others in the living room, where Ethan was happily teaching Matthew our favorite board game, and my mother, Josephine, cheered him on. The scene of domestic tranquility only strengthened my resolve. Later that night, as I sat on the terrace with a glass of wine and my mother by my side under the clear, starlit sky, our hearts grew heavy. Then a threatening message arrived from Williams himself, warning me about Ethan's peanut allergy and demanding I withdraw my statement to the Tribune. My hands trembled as I showed it to my mother. "This ends tomorrow," she declared with fierce determination. We quickly alerted our legal team and pressed ahead with our plan to tell our story our way, proving that true kindness and integrity can never be silenced. Before dinner, an unexpected email arrived from Richard Blackwood. He explained that after meeting Ethan Anderson in economy class, he was so impressed by the boy's kindness that the Blackwood Foundation was establishing a new scholarship in Ethan's name. Richard wrote that even the smallest gesture can reveal the largest truths about character, and his email would be released to the media the next morning. Yet while support was growing, Victor Williams continued his ruthless campaign. His on-air interview on GMA painted him as a grieving father, accusing Dr. Shannice Anderson of negligence and claiming she was hiding behind Ethan to deflect responsibility. Williams even showed surveillance photos of Ethan and Shannice at the museum, twisting every moment to suit his bitter narrative. That night, after triple-checking the locks and ensuring every precaution was in place against Williams exploiting Ethan's peanut allergy, Shannice wrestled with deep exhaustion and mounting fury. In the quiet garden, she gently explained to Ethan, "Remember Aaliyah, the little girl I helped?" Mr. Williams is angry because he cannot accept that kindness exists. He uses lies and threats to hide his own cruelty. Ethan listened with wide, thoughtful eyes, and Shannice hugged him tight, promising, "No matter what he says, your generous heart will always shine, and we will protect that light together." Later that afternoon, Cynthia Williams, a refined yet visibly exhausted woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and designer clothes, met with Dr. Shannice Anderson in the villa's quiet study. Cynthia's voice trembled as she explained that Victor Williams had escalated his cruel vendetta by using his daughter as a weapon against Shannice. She revealed that Victor's allegations of negligence were entirely fabricated, designed to distract from federal investigations into his own fraudulent real estate dealings and tax evasion. Cynthia recounted how Victor had even forbidden Aaliyah from attending her own funeral, a callous act that underscored his desperation and disregard for family bonds. Shannice listened, her heart heavy with sorrow yet steeled by professional integrity, as she affirmed that Aaliyah was thriving thanks to her team's careful and skilled care during the critical surgery. Though Victor's bitter attacks struck at both her reputation and her soul, Shannice resolved to stand firm against his manufactured narrative. Cynthia's honest confession, born of her own mounting fear for her daughter's well-being, only deepened Shannice's determination to protect her patients and her family from such malevolence. Their conversation, filled with tension and aching honesty, left Shannice with renewed resolve to confront the relentless cruelty of Victor Williams while sheltering those she loved from his destructive schemes. Dr. Eleanor Carter sat in the quiet study at the Napa Villa as Cynthia Williams, trembling yet determined, pulled a USB drive from her purse. "This drive contains financial records and recordings that Victor Williams does not know I have access to," Cynthia whispered, her hand shaking as she set it on the desk. "I can't let him continue his ruthless campaign, not when he is willing to threaten a child." Eleanor's heart pounded as she absorbed Cynthia's words. "Why are you doing this, Cynthia? You're risking so much," she asked, her voice soft with concern. Tears welled in Cynthia's eyes as she explained that she had discovered letters from Amara, Victor's first wife and Aaliyah's birth mother, that he had intercepted and hidden. Amara fought to keep a relationship with her daughter until the very end, even though Victor claimed she abandoned them, Cynthia said, her voice cracking with pain. "When I confronted him, he threatened to take Aaliyah away from me too. He treats people like possessions to be controlled or discarded." Eleanor listened in silence, feeling both the sting of betrayal and the weight of responsibility. Cynthia continued, "I've spoken with divorce attorneys. Once everything with you is resolved, Aaliyah and I will leave this nightmare behind." The evidence was damning. A clear record of Williams fabricating claims and threatening her family. Later that evening, Eleanor gathered with Eliza, Vanessa, and Jackson to review the materials. Vanessa's eyes narrowed as she declared, "This changes everything. We can hand this over to the FBI to add charges of witness intimidation and harassment to his mounting legal troubles." Even as they developed a strategy to expose Victor Williams without endangering Caleb or Aaliyah further, Eleanor felt a mix of dread and resolve. A private meeting was arranged with Williams, his attorneys, FBI agents, and Eleanor's legal team. When confronted with the evidence Cynthia provided, Williams' arrogant demeanor crumbled. The meeting ended with him signing a comprehensive agreement that included a public retraction of all his allegations, a substantial donation to a children's cardiac care foundation in Aaliyah's name, and his promise to cease all contact with the Carter family. Unbeknownst to him, the FBI had already obtained warrants based on the financial records Cynthia had shared. By that evening, breaking news announced Victor Williams' arrest on charges of wire fraud, tax evasion, and witness intimidation. Cynthia and Aaliyah were safely relocated, and at the Napa villa, Caleb watched the news with wide eyes. "Is that the man who said mean things about you, Mom?" he asked softly. "Yes, honey, but we don't need to worry about him anymore," Eleanor replied gently. "The important thing is that Aaliyah is safe and well." Over the next few weeks, the documentary production accelerated, transforming Caleb's spontaneous act of kindness into a powerful message of integrity and hope. The film, titled First Class Heart, not only chronicled the journey of a boy who gave up his seat on an airplane, but also revealed the far-reaching impact of compassion in the face of ruthless ambition. At the film's premiere, Eleanor watched as Caleb's gentle spirit shone on screen, reminding everyone that even in a world dominated by greed and cruelty, a pure, generous heart can spark change. And as the credits rolled, Eleanor knew with unwavering certainty that their family's strength and kindness would light the way forward for all those touched by their story.